Okay, Hazak Baruch and good morning. Thank you everyone for joining us on this beautiful Monday morning as we are entering the final Perashah of the book of Shemot, Perashat Pekudey. And now Perashah, of course, a lot to talk about. And again, because this year is a double Adar, we have a lot to talk about because our Perashiot are now each one given their own week. We don't have to divide the time, as they say, with the other Perashiot if it's doubled up. So Perashat Pekudey deals primarily with the clothing of the Kohen Gadol. Again, it's a mirror. Two Perashiot of Teruma and Tetzaveh, and then the mirror is Vayakel and Pekudey. Okay, is that clear? I want everyone to understand that. Teruma and Tetzaveh is where God commands Moshe to build the Mishkan and to manufacture the clothing. So that's Teruma and Tetzaveh. But then we have the actual doing of the commandments, where they actually make the vessels, where they actually manufacture the clothing. So our Perashah, Pekudey, is the mirror of Perashat Tetzaveh. Tetzaveh is where God tells Moshe to do it, and Pekudey is where they actually do it. Okay? Pekudey, so we're always going to refer back and forth, a lot of comparing and contrasting. So there's a very interesting pasuk in the beginning of our Perashat Pekudey, before we actually discuss the clothing of the Kohen Gadol. Our Perashah begins and tells us, it gives us an accounting. It gives us a reckoning. And the Torah begins, and that's what Pekudey means. Ele Pekudey ha-mishkan, mishkan ha-edut. By the way, you want to know how much gold was donated, how much silver was donated, how much of all the things were donated? And here we go. The Perashah begins, and it lists to the penny, to the gram, every single article that was donated to the building of the Mishkan. Okay? In the beginning of our Perashah, Pasuk Chav Bet, it says the following. Ubtzalel ben Uri ben Hur lemate Yehuda. Him we know. Betzalel was the contractor, right? Betzalel ben Uri ben Hur lemate Yehuda. What did he do? Asa et kol asher tziva Adonai et Moshe. A very interesting pasuk. Listen to what the pasuk says. It says that this man, Betzalel, who according to our rabbis was merely 13 years old at the time. Okay, can you imagine a 13-year-old in charge of the entire project of the building of the Mishkan? Okay, yeah, okay. So sign him up. I have a daughter. Okay, fine. So Betzalel, who was only 13 according to our rabbis, did everything. Asa et kol asher tziva Hashem et Moshe. Very interesting. If you analyze those words deeply, you'll notice that there's a little bit of a problem with those words. Let's read it again. Betzalel did everything that God commanded Moshe. Why are those words problematic? It doesn't say that he did everything that Moshe commanded him. It says that he did everything that God commanded Moshe. Now you may say, okay, what's the difference? Now let us learn together, my friends, Rashi. Open up to Rashi on this pasuk 22. Asher tziva oto Moshe en kativ kan. It doesn't say that he did everything that Moshe commanded him. It says that he did everything that God commanded Moshe. Because matter of fact, we're going to see in a minute that Betzalel deviated from what Moshe commanded him. Can you imagine? We're going to see very soon that Moshe actually told him to do it one way, and Betzalel did it another way. And that's why it doesn't say that he followed what Moshe told him, because he didn't. Because Moshe told him one thing. He actually followed what Hashem told Moshe. What does that mean? Take a look. Afilu dvarim, says Rashi, shelo amar lo rabo. Even things that Moshe left out, things that Moshe didn't tell him. Hiskima da'ato. But still Betzalel was able, through prophecy in a way, to know the real intentions of Hashem. Ki Moshe tziva leBetzalel. What do I mean? So let's make it concrete. Let's give an example. Moshe tziva leBetzalel. Moshe commands Betzalel la'asot tchila kelim. First, he commands Betzalel to make the vessels. Ve'ahar kach mishkan. And then the structure. Yes? Every house, there's two parts to a house. There's the house that you live in, and then there's the furniture in the house. Okay? So too with the Mishkan. There's the actual Mishkan, the four walls, the covering, the roof, everything, right? The walls and everything. And then there's the vessels inside. What are the furniture? What's the furniture inside the house of God? The Aron, the Ark, the Menorah, right? They didn't have couches. They didn't have dining room tables, but they had furniture. Okay? They had furniture of how we served Hashem, right? The Ark, the Menorah, the Mizbeach, the sink, all of the things, right? All of the things that we served Hashem with in the Mishkan. So there's the house, the four walls and the roof, and then there's the furniture inside. Okay? When Moshe commands Betzalel, says Rashi, he first commands him to make the vessels, the furniture, and only then to make the house. Amar lo Betzalel, but then Betzalel comes and interjects and he says, Mechila, Rabbi, forgive me with all due respect. Minhag ha'olam la'asot tehila bait ve'ahar kach mesim kelim betocho. What do you do when you build a house? Do you first buy the furniture or do you first find the house? What's the correct way when building a house? Way me and you do it, right? I think most of us, we first buy the house and then we see the size of the room, we see which furniture is needed, we see what we could fit, we see what we need. You don't buy a furniture before buying the house, right? So Moshe commands Betzalel to first build the furniture. And then after the furniture, I need you to now build the house. But what does he say? He says, excuse me, Moshe, the way of the world is you first make the house, the bait, then you buy the furniture. And what does Amar lo Moshe, what does Moshe say back? Betzel el hayita, wow. You must have been in the shadow of God. How do you say shadow in Hebrew? Tzel. How do you say God? El, Aleph Lamed. Put those two words together. Betzalel, that's his name. Betzalel is the name. It means in the shadow of God. Says Moshe, you must have been sitting in the shadow of God because actually, you're right. God did command me exactly the way you said it. And therefore, Betzalel makes the Mishkan first and then the vessels. So here we have a very interesting machloket, if you will. A machloket, not between Shammai and Hillel, not between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam, a machloket between Moshe Rabbeinu and Betzalel. Okay? What does Moshe want to build first? Moshe says, first let's build the vessels, and then we'll build the house. And what does Betzalel say? That's not the way it works. First you build a house, and then you build the vessels. So really, and this is the end of Rashi, really Rashi over here is quoting a Gemara on Masechet Berachot, page 55. And we have to ask a few questions on this machloket. Okay? Number one, how in the world is Betzalel allowed to argue on Moshe? It's one thing you want to argue on Rambam, Rashi, as big as they are. I understand machloket. But to argue on Moshe Rabbeinu? You got to be out of your mind. And again, he's 13 years old, according to our rabbis. And let's give more depth to the question. Based on what is he arguing on Moshe? A pasuk? Something that he heard? He's arguing on Moshe based on the Noeg Sheba'olam, the way of the world, Moshe. The way of the world is to do this. So I think that's how we should do it here. Since when is the way of the world a proof for how things should be done in the house of God? The house of God is a higher level. I don't have a problem if things are done differently. We know many miracles happened in the Mishkan that wasn't the way of the world. As an example, the way of the world is that the windows bring light into the house. In the Mishkan, that's not how it was. In the Mishkan, the windows were very narrow on the inside and they went the other way around. Because the goal was to actually illuminate from inside out. We don't need to learn from the world how to build a house for God. So just because that's not the way it worked in the normal, yes, you're right, when me and you build a house, first we build the house and then we build the furniture. But does that mean that that's how Hashem has to do it? Hashem is the one that we learn from, not vice versa. Okay? That's one question. And really, we must ask, why did Moshe deviate from what Hashem said? Really, Bezalel is right. Bezalel is correct. That Hashem first told Moshe to build the house and then the vessels. So why did Moshe reverse what Hashem told him? Really, it's maybe backwards. We should ask on Moshe more than Bezalel. Hashem said house and then furniture. Moshe flipped it. He said furniture and then house. And then Bezalel flipped it again according to what God wanted. House and then furniture. So why did Moshe flip it in the middle? Okay. To answer all of these questions, Rabbi Bernstein brings from Rabbi Heller an amazing idea. And really this is an amazing lesson in all of our relationships in life, but specifically in the relationship that we have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We have to ask, what comes first? Love or action? What comes first? Do you love someone and then you perform? Or do you perform and then you love? The motivation or the love or the feelings? Motivation or action? Right? We love Hashem and we do for Hashem, or opposite? No. We do for Hashem and then we love Hashem. Usually, most people think that the feeling leads to the action. That means when you love someone, you'll do for that someone. Every one of us gets up every day, we go to work, we do what we have to do throughout the day because we want to provide for our family, because we love our family. And therefore, we love, and that's what drives us to do. Loving leads to doing, to giving. However, it's not so simple. Yes, there is such a concept that loving leads to giving, but that's only for a very high level. When a person's on a very high level, on a very high madrega of spirituality, so yes, they have the motivation, and the motivation can lead to the doing. However, many times, the correct order is actually backwards. Many times, it's not that you love and therefore you give, but to the contrary, you give, and the giving breeds love. That means that many times in relationships, take as an example a boy and girl. They're going out and they are in love. Okay? They're infatuated, whatever word you want to use. And what happens is many times at a certain point in the relationship, the boy and the girl decide they want to get married. And all of a sudden, a week or a month, something happens into the marriage, however much time, doesn't matter. Something happens where the boy and the girl all of a sudden start losing that excitement. And they say, I don't know what happened. I used to love this person. The love is going away. The excitement's gone. The sparks are fading. Right? What's the answer to that? Right? How does one all of a sudden stop loving somebody? The answer is very simple. Because when they were going out, what were they doing throughout the engagement? They were giving. They were giving, they were doing, they were sending texts, they were buying gifts for each other, they were doing and giving to the other person. He's giving to her, she's giving to him. When they have the swani, when they have the parties, she comes over for dinner, he goes over for Shabbat, they put a watch on his plate, they put a thing, right? There's constant giving from one side to the other. And what happens when there's giving? The giving is what leads to love. The word in Hebrew for love, anyone know how to say love? Ahava. Ahava, the root of the word ahava is the word hav. Hav in Hebrew means tavi, lehavi, give. Hey, can you give me? Lehavi. In Hebrew, love and giving are synonymous. They come from the same shortish, from the same root. That means that the way to start loving someone is to start giving them. If there's somebody that you don't like, there's someone in the community that you're not so friendly with, if there's somebody that maybe you're a little bit in a fight with. So actually a very powerful way of getting rid of that hatred is by giving that person. Again, we often don't think like that. Usually we think that I have to love them and then I give them. But the truth is the opposite is also true. Says Rabbi Dessler, when you give, you will start to love. If there's someone that you don't like, okay, try this. you'll see how powerful it is. If there's someone that you don't like, just start giving them. Start helping them. Start inviting them to your parties. You have a hangout, start inviting them to that. You start giving to someone, and then you automatically will start feeling invested into that person, and love will follow from that giving. I remember one time when I lived in Israel, I may have shared the story with you, but when I was living in Israel, I was in Kolel, and I remember I came back one year for Sukkot. Okay, so watch this. So my wife and I, we came back for Sukkot to America, and part of what you try to do when you have an apartment in Israel, especially for Sukkot and Pesach, is now that the apartment's empty, you rent it out. Okay, you rent it out to a family who's coming to spend the holidays in Israel. This was the first Airbnb, okay? This was the first Airbnb. So you try to rent out your apartment, you try to, it helps pay the month's rent, you know what I mean? Anyways, my chavruta put me in touch with a family member of his from Argentina who was coming to Yerushalayim for Sukkot. They wanted a place in Har Nof where I lived. I said, okay, he put me in touch with his cousin. The guy said, no problem, we'll take the apartment. We agreed on a price, beautiful. Okay, everything's great. Guy comes, I move out, I make the house as presentable as possible. Okay, middle of holiday, middle of Chol HaMoed, the guy calls me up. How's it going? Good. How's the apartment? Everything okay? Okay, Chag Sameach. He says, by the way, your neighbor upstairs came and they took your kitchen table. Like, what? Why'd you let him do that? He's like, I don't know, I was bringing in the groceries from the car, and as I'm walking in and out, the door was open, and I'm walking back in with some of the groceries. I see him just coming in from upstairs with his son. They're looking around, they look in the kitchen, they say, come, help me. And he starts picking up your kitchen table, and he starts taking it upstairs. Like, why'd you let a guy into my apartment? He's like, I don't know, he said it was his. Anyways, I called the neighbor up, and before I even said anything, the guy starts yelling, Mizrahi, don't start with me. It's my table. I do what I want. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh my God, hello? Could you please explain to me what in the world is going on? Okay, I'm just calling to understand the situation. Anyways, turns out, I was already in the apartment for 1.5 years. So it turns out that 4 years before I moved in, he lent that table to the person that was living there. He didn't actually lend it. He really, he didn't need it. And he didn't have the storage room for it. So he gave it to the person in that apartment to store for him. Okay? And now that he needed it for Sukkot, for his Sukkah, he decided to take the table back again. Okay, anyways, I was very upset at how the guy dealt with it. I said, I understand it's your table. But, you don't just walk into somebody's apartment, especially when there's a tenant who's subleasing it. You just out of derech eretz, it's only respectful to call, listen, it's my table. Do you mind if we come in? You don't just walk into a house. It's just not how it works. I don't know, maybe in Israel, who knows? God bless, right? Achen, we're all brothers. So yeah, why not? You walk into the guy's house. Anyways, we got in a fight. We didn't leave off on good terms. And that was it. I came back from America. I went back to Israel, and I'm studying again. I'm learning, and that's it. He did his thing. I did my thing. We didn't really have anything to do with each other. And I remember a few months later came the beautiful holiday of Purim. What happens on Purim? Purim is when you have to start giving mishloach manot to all of your friends and family. So I'm sitting with my wife on the couch, and I remember going through the list. Who are we going to give to? How many people do we know already? We know 3 people in all of Israel. My brother and my rabbi and my chavruta. That's all. Anyways, we're going through the list, and all of a sudden, what does my wife do? You ready? Here's what she does. Everyone, look at me. She goes like this. I'm like, no. She's like, yes. You got to give to the guys upstairs. I'm like, are you kidding me? He's the guy that should apologize. Why do I have to give him? He should make the first step. He's the one that should approach me. He's the one that should apologize. He walked into my apartment and he did it in a very sneaky way. And then he was using us for our storage. Anyways, no matter what I said, my wife wouldn't budge. She's like, you got to give them. I'm like, okay. If that's what I have to do, that's what I have to do. God bless, right? The women, they're the best. So she's making the Mishloach Manot, and finally the day of Purim comes, and she goes, okay, here you go. It's ready. You could deliver it. I'm like, are you sure? Maybe I could just leave it on the door. She's like, no. Go upstairs, knock on the door, make sure you give it to them. Okay, so I start walking upstairs, and it was only 3 flights, okay? I start walking with the Mishloach Manot in my hand, and I don't know why, I'm so embarrassed, and I'm so hesitant, and I'm so scared, and I'm so shy, right? It's so hard to say sorry, right? It doesn't matter, you're wrong, you're right, it doesn't matter. Just someone that you know it's just uneasy with, right? You don't know how they're going to react, right? It's just uncomfortable. Okay, so I start walking upstairs with the Mishloach Manot. I get to the door, I'm about to knock, I start scratching my head, I start walking back downstairs, I start going back to the door 10 times, hesitating back and forth. Finally, I just push the doorbell, I just ring the bell. And he finally comes to the door, he opens it up, okay? And he sees me with the Mishloach Manot, and I thought he was gonna yell at me, and he's gonna scream at me, and you chutzpah, and get out of here. The second he saw me standing there with the Mishloach Manot, the guy melted. The guy started melting like the Wicked Witch of the West, you know? And he started apologizing. He's now apologizing to me. I didn't even say anything. I'm just standing there with the Mishloach Manot. And what happens? He's like, Mizrahi, I'm so sorry. I really should have apologized. I'm like, yeah, keep going. And he's going on. And I'm like, listen, it was very silly, just over something so small. I hope you forgive me. Mechila. He said 100%. And he sees me standing there with my Mishloach Manot. I'm like, where should I put this? So he looks around, he goes, you can put it on the table. I'm kidding, he didn't say that. Okay, fine. So, either way, we exchanged Mishloach Manot, and that's it. That's the end of the story. I started all the hatred, all the negative feelings. I don't hate. Hate's like a very strong word. Right? I didn't hate the guy. But the bitter feelings, whatever it is, whatever feelings you want to call those feelings. Right? They just left. They just left from what? From one Mishloach Manot. So really, first of all, okay, when you're making your Mishloachs this year, when you're making your list, maybe have in that list one person that you don't necessarily want to give to, because they're not necessarily your friend. Usually we think of who are my friends, who are the people that I love. That's not the goal. The goal is not to make mishloachs for people that you love. Quite the contrary, the goal is to make mishloachs for the people that you don't love, people that you're not so friendly with. Maybe there's someone that we got into a fight with for whatever reason. Those are the people that we should start thinking of, that we should give to. The point is to bring the Jewish people together. Remember, the whole story of Purim happened because Yeshno Am Echad Mefuzar Umforad, because there was fighting and hatred amongst the Jewish people. That's why the whole story happened. And the whole Geulah, the salvation began when Esther says to Mordechai, Lech kenos et kol haYehudim. Go gather the Jewish people, not just to gather them to fast, but gather them and make sure there's no hatred, make sure there's unity, make sure there's love. So when this happens, my friends, all of a sudden, we have Ahavat Israel, we have unity. And the way to get there is through Mishloach Manot. Okay, so sometimes we love people and therefore we give them, but says Rabbi Dessler, the opposite is also true. Sometimes you give, and that giving leads to loving. That's true with someone that you don't like. That's true with a husband and wife. When they were going out and there was a lot of giving going on, so there was a lot of love going on, right? Can you feel, right? There's a lot of love in the air. But once they get married, the narrative flips. And instead of what can I give my spouse, it's all of a sudden, what can my spouse give me? The second something happens, the second they get married, and it's like, what are you going to do for me now? What are you going to give me? How are you going to help me? Did you make me lunch? Did you make me breakfast? Did you make enough money for me to spend? Did you, me? The whole time in the engagement, it's about them. And the parents are like, hello, they're taking advantage of you. They're always giving you less than what you give them. And we're like, I love them, it doesn't matter. Right? When we're engaged, it's all about giving. And then we wonder, why did I stop loving them? Why you stop loving is because you stopped giving. Giving, have Giving leads to ahava, leads to loving. Okay? Again, that's true with spouses, true with people that we don't like, and it's true with Hashem. A lot of times, with our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we're not in love. Sometimes we're just not in the mood. Sometimes we have days or weeks or years that we just, I don't know. Of course, I believe in Hashem, chas v'shalom. I don't not believe in Him. I'm just not motivated. I'm not motivated. I'm very blah. I'm very, just whatever. It is what it is. Sometimes we have moments in our lives that we're supercharged, right? We're like, oh my God, I want to pray 17 times a day, and I want to wear 3 tefillins, and I want to do all these things. And then we have those days that we're just not motivated. And we have to remember that when we're not motivated, sometimes the doing will lead to the motivation. Sometimes you're not excited to get up and to go work out. You just don't want to. And you know you should. You know you should. It's part of your schedule. You put it down in the calendar. Every Monday is when I work out and I should go for my hour jog. And I'm just not motivated. But sometimes the doing, just getting up and putting the sneakers on and starting it, slowly, it could take once, twice, it could be after 10 or 100 times. But slowly, the more we do, the more we start loving that thing. Okay, a lot of times, our children, we try to get them to do something. Maybe it's playing an instrument, or maybe it's a certain hobby that they're not interested, they're not excited to do it. They don't want to do it. And we tell them, it doesn't matter if you want to, do it anyways. What happens is many times, once turns into 10, turns into 100, and then 5, 10 years later, what started off as a hatred, as a chore, I have to play the violin. Now they love playing the violin. Now they love playing that instrument. Now they love playing that sport. Now they love that hobby. So sometimes doing, the more we do, the more we invest, the more we start loving something. So if we don't love God, if we're not motivated to serve God, do the mitzvot anyways. Do it without love. Do it without motivation. Like Nike says, just do it. And when you just do it, the doing leads to the loving. The feelings are not always what drive the action. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes the actions are what drive the feelings. What's very interesting, in the first paragraph of Shema, if you have a Sidur, you could open it up. In the first paragraph, how does it begin after we say Shema Yisrael? It begins with a very famous word that we picked today. Ve'ahavta. And you shall love your God. Right? What does that mean? Love God. So first, the pasuk begins with love. And then, it says, Veshinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha bebetecha oblechtecha baderech ub'shovecha ub'kumecha. So it begins with love, and the love is what breeds the actions. The wearing the tefillin, the putting the mezuzah, the teaching Torah to your kids, the doing of the mitzvot. So love leads to doing. And that's usually a very, very, very high level. But sometimes you're not able to reach that level. Sometimes we're not in love. So what do I do on those days that I wake up that I'm not motivated? I don't want to go to work. I don't want to go work out. I don't want to be with my spouse. I don't want to, be with Hashem. And that's why the second paragraph of Shema comes in. Look at this beautiful paragraph. The second paragraph says, Vehaya. And what does Vehaya mean? And it will be. But maybe if I could exercise my drash skills right now, okay, and I take you on a completely not pshat interpretation. Vehaya, and it will be that sometimes you won't be motivated. And sometimes the love is not there, so what do? Im shamoa tishme'u el mitzvotai. First, do the mitzvot. And then, what's the next words? Le'ahava. Then you will start loving. Amazing. Look in the Shema. Okay, it's beautiful. So the first paragraph begins with the word love, and the love is what leads to the mitzvot. And the second paragraph says, but sometimes you won't have that love. So im shamoa tishme'u, if you do anyways. You don't like this person, but you give them mishloach anyways. You're not in love with your spouse, but you get up and you do for them anyways. You're not in love with this thing that you're supposed to do, but you do it anyways. What will that happen? The result will be le'ahava. Le'ahava is the result. Love will follow. The love will follow. So this is an amazing idea. So how does this, just to tie it back, how does this tie back to our parasha? So again, in the beginning, God told Moshe to build first the Mishkan, the vessels, and then the house. Right? That's what God says back in Parashat Tirumah. That was originally the goal. Vessels and then house. What happened was, we messed up. We did a Chet HaEgel. And now everything changed. And now God says, first build the house and then the vessels. Why is that? So the Rabbeinu Bachya that we quoted a few weeks ago, remember what Rabbeinu Bachya taught us? Rabbeinu Bachya said that the mitzvot of the Mishkan really correspond to the mitzvot that we have to do between us and God, and they really correspond to the limbs that we have in our body. The Mishkan is not just a house of God. The Mishkan is supposed to be an image, a replica of the human body. That's really what the Mishkan is. The goal is not that God should reside in the temple. The goal is that God should reside in us. The temple, the Mishkan, is a mini us, or a very big us, right? However you want to look at it. But the Rabbeinu Bachya says that I've counted 248 steps. 248 steps in building the Mishkan. Why 248? Because 248 corresponds to the 248 positive commandments that we have in our beautiful Torah. And they correspond to the 248 limbs that a person has in their body. And the truth is that the goal is not just to make the vessels and the Mishkan like this, but that really our whole body should become like a Mishkan. And just like the Mishkan has to be pure, our bodies should be pure. And just like the Mishkan should have all of these features, our body should be like all of those things, pure with those features, to be able to be a vessel to receive the Shekhinah, the glory of God. And our goal when we read about the commandments of the Mishkan is not just to read about the Mishkan itself, but to learn from each and every one. And go back, please, to our classes in the past that we had on Perashat Tirumah and Tetzaveh. And we've had many classes showing lessons that we can learn from the Mishkan. Lessons that we can learn how to make our body like a Mishkan for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if it's true that the Mishkan is supposed to be a microcosm of the human body, the 248 steps in building the Mishkan correspond to the 248 limbs in the human body. If that is the case, it is possible to suggest, says Rabbi Heller, that just like there's inner limbs and outer limbs, there's organs that we see on the outside, there's limbs that are more inside, so too in the Mishkan, the inner limbs correspond to the inner vessels. The outer vessels correspond to the outer limbs. And he says if that's the case, it's very possible that all of the vessels that were on the inside, the furniture of the Mishkan that was hidden, correspond to the hidden limbs of the human body. That's i.e. the feelings, the love, the motivation. The inside corresponding to the inside, the outside corresponding to the outside. And what's the correct order? Going back to our class today. What's the correct order of serving Hashem? Outside in or inside out? Doing leads to feelings, or feelings drive the doing, the action? Well, originally when the Jews were on a very high level, so the feelings were there first. And the feelings are what drove the actions. And that's why God originally said, I want you to first make the vessels, the furniture, and then you can make the house. But then the Jewish people committed the sin of Chet HaEgel. They committed the sin of the golden calf. And when they did that, they fell to a very, 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 very low level. And they were no longer able to serve God in this manner. Now, the love for Hashem was no longer there. That's like what happens after you get into a fight with your spouse, after the wedding, when life just becomes very stale. And now the love is no longer there. And so now God changes and says to Moshe, now, first you must build the house. First you must build the covering. First you must do work on the outside, and the actions, the external, are what will lead to the feelings, to the inside, to the furniture. Beautiful, very powerful. And that's what God told Moshe. Moshe was hoping that he could keep the Jews on the high level that they were before Chet HaEgel. So he tells Bezalel to first do the furniture, but then the house. But then Bezalel says, my master Moshe, that's not the way of the world. Meaning, that's not what Hashem said. I know you would like to keep it and to keep us on that original high level, but that's not what Hashem said. Unfortunately, we have fallen, we've dropped from the level of how we were before the Chet HaEgel, and now the proper order is outside and then in. First to do, and then to feel. And that's why Bezalel first builds the house. That's the way of the world. That's the level that we are on today. So first the house, and then the furniture. So this is an amazing, amazing lesson, an amazing idea, not only for the Mishkan and the vessels, but really for our relationships, for our lives. When there's things that we're not so motivated to do, when the feeling is lacking. So it's at those moments that we must remember the lesson that sometimes inside out is nice, but when you don't have the inside out, then it's outside in. It's working on the chuts, working on the actions, and the actions will drive the motivation. The actions will bring and breed the feelings to slowly come. That's true whether it's with our service of Hashem, that we're not always motivated to serve God, or it's true with our relationship with our spouse. It's true with neighbors or people in our community that we don't necessarily have such amazing feelings for. And the remedy is to remember that when you don't have the ve'ahavta, when you don't have the love to start off the relationship, then vehaya, what will happen is the actions will come, and slowly the actions will lead to the loving, to the le'ahava, to the motivation, and the motivation will follow. The motivation will follow. Again, not maybe right away, but with a lot of discipline, a lot of hard work. And by the way, if I could just add one more thing, very powerful idea. You ready for this? We know that Avraham was Ish HaChesed. Avraham was kindness. Yitzchak was what? What was his strength? His midah, his attribute was Gevurah. Gevurah is discipline, right? What does that mean, discipline? We often don't speak so much of Yitzchak, but really Yitzchak's midah is very powerful. Yitzchak, the midah of discipline is super important. Because Avraham, chesed is kindness, motivation. Everyone loves chesed. Every Jew, religious or not, loves chesed. Everyone loves Avraham. When you're with Avraham, life's great. It's flowers and sunshines and unicorns. It's all beautiful. Chesed. We love, it's a breath of fresh air. We love chesed. But what happens when Avraham dies? What happens when you get married and the love goes away? What happens when the motivation fades? What happens when Avraham's no longer around? We all have those moments in our lives that Avraham is gone. The chesed, the feeling, the excitement is gone. What to do when the excitement fades away? And this is where the midah of Yitzchak kicks in. Yitzchak is discipline. So Avraham was from the inside out. When you're motivated, I want to give. When I'm motivated, I want to pray. When I'm motivated, I want to learn. When I'm motivated, I want to keep kosher. When I'm motivated, I want to keep Shabbat. What happens when it gets a little bit difficult? And you're not motivated, and Avraham dies, and you don't have the motivation anymore. And then it's not easy anymore to keep Shabbat. It's very nice to keep Shabbat when you're in a place for Shabbat, where everyone's keeping Shabbat, and there's great classes, and you're on the Shabbaton. It's very easy to keep. But what happens when you're all of a sudden back home, and then there's the routine, the day-to-day, and then all of a sudden, you're not interested in keeping Shabbat. Now the shul's very, very, very far, and you got to walk much further than when you were in the Shabbaton. Now to keep Shabbat's very difficult. Now to keep kosher is not easy anymore. Now you're not motivated anymore to do. So how does one proceed when they're not motivated? And the answer is, when you're not motivated, you need Yitzchak. You need the discipline of Yitzchak. Do it anyways. Do it anyways without motivation. A student once came, he said, Rabbi, I don't have a cheshek to learn. You know what's cheshek? Desire. Rabbi, I don't have a desire to learn. The Rebbe said, so learn without a cheshek. So learn without a desire. We don't always have to be motivated in life. You don't always have to be with Avraham Avinu to do good things. It's nicer when we have Avraham. It's nicer when we're motivated. It's nicer when we're excited. Yes, it is. But then there will be many days in our lives that we're not with Avraham Avinu. It's boring, it's raining, it's dark, it's blah, bland. And on those days is when we have to play the discipline of Yitzchak card. To learn without a desire. I don't love my husband, I'm going to do for him anyways. I don't love my spouse, my wife, I'm going to do for her anyways. I'm not motivated to serve Hashem, I'm going to serve anyways. I don't want to go to the gym, I'm going to go anyways. I don't want to do, I'm going to do anyways. Because I know that that's what should be done. And when we have the discipline, when we have the gvura, when we have the strength of Yitzchak, then what's the result? The result is Yaakov. Yaakov, the final of the Avot, is Tiferet, is beauty. Yaakov is the synthesis of Chesed and Gevura. He's the middle, he's the balance. He's that beautiful result when we have motivation, when we have discipline, knowing each time when to use each card. So this is something that I think really helps us in so many ways, in so many avenues, in so many of our relationships in our lives, knowing when to play this midah, when to play that midah, that sometimes the motivation leads to the actions, but sometimes the motivation is not there, and we have the gvura, the discipline of Yitzchak, to allow us to do anyways. And slowly, the actions will lead to the motivation, will lead to the feeling. The have, the giving, will lead to ahava, to the loving. We'll stop over here. Have a wonderful day, God willing. We'll see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.